So if you've been to one of the other Commissioner conversations that we've had so far, I think you know what's about to happen. Each of our panel will give a very short 4-minute explanation of their channel or platform, what they're into, what they're looking for, and then we will follow up with some questions and hopefully a Q&A with the audience, either IRL, as the teens say, with a roving microphone, or online with the Slido website. So please submit your questions. Our first Commissioner to tell us what they're after is Sioned, Commissioner for Children and Learners for S4C. So if you'd like to take the lectern, thank you.
Hi everybody, like the intro said, I'm Sioned Geraint, and I'm the Content Commissioner for Children and Learners at S4C, and I'm the only one. So I'm responsible for commissioning content across all the children's output and the brands, and the two main brands at the moment are Q, which is for our 0 to 6-year-olds, and Stunch, which is for the 7 to 12s. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with the S4C children's output, we fill 39 linear hours a week with output. It's a mixture of mainly live action content and animation, which we buy in and we dub into Welsh. And the content sits linear, it sits on other platforms, and it also sits on our on-demand service, which is Click, and it sits on iPlayer. Now, as the only Welsh language broadcaster, this gives us quite a few challenges because we have to please as many children as possible whilst being inclusive of all levels of Welsh fluency. And at the moment, that's quite a focus at the moment in Wales because the Welsh Government have decided that they want 1 million new Welsh speakers by 2050. So the content that we commission and that our indies produce is really key in that. So I'm looking for ideas that are entertaining and educational, which can work across all kinds of platforms so that children can access Welsh language content whenever and wherever they want to and learn and be entertained by it. But also the added bit of being included in the language. Now, what about the teens, you may be asking? Well, historically, we haven't been commissioning for the teens. There's a strong young people brand from 16 plus, which is called Hansh, which is really successful, but there's a gap for the 16 to 16s. So I'm very happy to be standing here today to tell you that that's about to change. So the what next is really, really good for us, it's really key for us. The channel is looking at the whole content whole strategy, but I do know that the children's strategy will become a really good pillar within that and a really important pillar. So there will be exciting developments and changes within children over the next coming months and over the next years, which I'm really chuffed about. And that means starting up a strategy for the 13 to 16-year-olds, which we've been losing and they're not coming back to the channel. So they're a really important age for us to target. Now, it's early days, and I don't have any specifics, but I can tell you that we'll be looking, in the first instance, for drama. And drama that resonates with our audience, obviously. So if anyone out there is interested in knowing more, get in touch by email, and then I can keep you in the loop as things develop, and that's likely to happen quite quickly over the next coming months, I would think. Now, the What Next conversation about teens and our approach, how we publish, what the content is, where we put it out, has been kicked off by two productions that were commissioned by my predecessor, two drama productions with support from the YAC Fund. They're called Y Gyfrinach, which is The Secret, and Persona. Now, Persona starts going out tomorrow, in actual fact, but they've been, it's really excited the industry in Wales that this kind of content can be made. And it started the conversation for us, which is brilliant. So I'm going to finish with a sizzle of these two, which hopefully is the start of a new and exciting future for teen content on S4C. Diolch yn fawr.
Mae'n nuts. Dwi'n newydd weld rhywbeth fi ddim fod gweld.
Mae un person yn yr ystafell yn cuddio gyfrinach fawr.
Oedd hi'n ffrind gorau i fi. A nath hi farw mewn ofyn.
Mae'n messed up. Help me!
Gyfeillion, mae'n rhaid i ni warchod ein hunain rhag llygredd cymdeithas.
Tyd, bych ti'n awn o fi?
Dwi 'di gweld tattoo na blaen.
Rili eisiau siarad am y peth. Isio bit na o yma heddiw.
Ti'n perthyn i ni.
Thank you, Sioned. And now please welcome Carl, Head of Youth and Digital at Channel 4.
Hello, everyone. My name's Carl Warner. I'm Head of Youth and Digital at Channel 4. That means I oversee E4, E4 Extra, which is our newly launched sister channel to E4, the digital music channels, and also the commissioning strategy for our digital social channels, which Evie will speak to in a moment. E4, for those that don't know, is a channel that targets 16 to 34-year-olds. But our big challenge, as it is for me personally, is to try and stay younger. So we are also targeting 16 to 24s as a sort of sweet spot. So everything that we're commissioning or talent that we're working for, we're looking at those people that appeal to 16 to 24s as much as possible. The biggest show we've got on the channel is Married at First Sight, and that has been launched last year. We've got a new series coming up this year. And it has sort of been part of the pivot towards factual and reality on E4. So we stopped, or paused at least, on the original scripted commissions that we used to do on E4, and that's a reaction to the COVID impact on budgets a few years ago, and also the change in market. So factual and reality are the main genre focuses on E4. The budget for the channel as a whole is about 80 million. Married at First Sight, as I said, is the #1 show. It's not just the #1 show on linear for E4, but it's also the #1 brand on all four. It's huge, absolute monster. If you haven't seen it, Married at First Sight is a celebration of love and marriage and double-crossing and cheating. It's beautiful. You'll love it if you haven't seen it. And the three key sort of areas that we or buckets, if you like, that we commission into on E4 are character-led factual, self-contained formats, returnable formats, the sort of lower cost formats, things like Tattoo Fixers or Don't Tell a Bride in the past have worked really well for us in that space. And then big premium reality shows like Married at First Sight, Celebs Go Dating. Couple of sort of things worth noting, a show like Teen First Dates, which the BFI Youth and Audience Content Fund really helped to budget and fund. It's been a huge success and skewed really, really young. So we're also looking for more propositions in that space. I think that's it. I can run out of time. I know I've got a short amount of time. I'm going to play. I apologise in advance for the Butt Blender 900, which you'll see in a moment. It will make sense to you when you see it, and I apologise for that. It's quite early for it.
E4, a big, beautiful, bulbous onion. Layers, depth, tears.
My wife's a psychopath.
But it's not an onion. It's a highly professional telly channel with naked ambition and fuck machines.
I've nicknamed mine the Bumhole Blender 9000.
Ooh. Where dancers...
Can you dirty dance? There was bumping, grinding.
Martin Anglia.
Oh, I loved it.
And drama queens...
If you want to get it out, we can get it out.
Peacefully coexist.
Don't roll your eyes at me like that.
Sort of. But it's also emotional.
We do get on. It's just unfortunate that one bit that we can't get just isn't there.
What is that?
Love.
And challenging.
I want to mentor these teen moms because I've been where they're at. Welcome to the academy.
E4 is a place where love blossoms.
You call me beautiful. You call me beautiful.
A place where love crumbles.
I've always thought she was the one. I don't want to get emotional, but I always thought she was. This is not the girl you fell in love with, man.
And a place where people stick things up their penises.
Excuse me?
Oh, I love a cock or two.
So join us in our brave new world of televisual entertainment.
You know you're marrying into our family, don't you?
Oozing with heart.
Oh my God.
Fizzing with surprises.
Something rubbing up against my leg.
And gushing with wholesomeness.
Gosh.
This is really exciting.
Buckle your butts, everyone!
Thought he's gonna be a handful.
This is out there even for us. They can hear you, Morty.
Thanks, Carl. It's even better on the big screen. That
It is,
one. Yeah.
it is. It's available if anyone wants to purchase one as well.
That's a different conference. Now I'd like to welcome Helen, Head of Education at BBC.
Thank you. quite hard to follow that one, really. But I'll do my best. Lovely to be here today at CMC. I'm Helen Fowkes. I'm Head of Education and Newsround at the BBC. So BBC Education serves a really wide audience, babies, children's and teens from 0 to 16 plus. We also support their parents and carers and teachers across the UK. And we do this through 3 online services. Tiny Happy People is our language initiative, our language acquisition initiative, which aims to halve the word gap for 0 to 4s. BBC Teach offers teachers high-quality curriculum-linked video content for the classroom, and BBC Bite Size is the BBC's student-facing education platform for children as soon as they start school, all the way up to their GCSEs and standards and beyond. Our aim is to support the whole child. So as well as our outstanding learning and revision digital content, we also help children and teens through campaigns and content to support their well-being, their mental health, helping them to spot fake news in their social feeds, and just being there for them throughout their school lives. And we also want to support them as they go on to the next steps after secondary school with our Bite Size Careers offer. Now, Bite Size reaches a lot of teenagers. 82% of all secondary school students say they use Bite Size at least once a term, and that rises, and the frequency rises, to 87% of 15 and 16-year-olds across the whole of the UK. So that's quite a lot of them. Bite Size obviously comes into its own during the exam season, and we're always there for teens then. But we do want to be there for them all the way through secondary school, supporting them academically. But what I want to share with you is 2 clips. I definitely couldn't do a sizzle after your one. So mine's 2 clips, just to kind of give you a bit of flavour of the other content that we make. First is our Bite Size Career offer, which has over 300 career profiles, as well as tips and tricks when you're choosing your options, when you want to go for an interview, and what you want to do after school. And then the second clip is of our new Bite Size campaign, The Other Side of the Story, which is in partnership with BBC News. And that supports teenagers to spot fake news and understand the importance of impartial news when they're looking for their information. We'll just play those 2 clips, if that's okay.
Oh my God, what am I doing with my life?
Fake it till you make it. It could be stressful.
Be confident, admit that you might fail sometimes, and just try new things, because you'll surprise yourself.
Drama facilitator.
Filmmaker.
Freelance audio engineer.
Music photographer. Junior soldier. Medical student.
Volcano guide. Personal trainer. Webmaker.
Farmer.
Paramedic.
Conservation officer. Freelance director. Radio presenter.
Solar farm manager.
Nurse. Games designer. Science officer. Waste warrior. Ambulance dispatcher.
So today, everybody, we're going to be doing the crap test. It's useful to use the crap test with articles that you're reading because it proves that they're not fake. So I'm going to be explaining what it is while Jacob does some keepy uppies until I'm finished. So when you start, I'll start up. So C means current and up to date. R means the relevance of it. Why is it relevant? A is for author. So who wrote it? Ball's gone over the fence. The second A is for accuracy. How accurate is it? And P is for purpose. What is the purpose of it? 5 stars. And he's done.
Okay, so there's a lot of news out there today, so use the crap test is all I'd say. So finally, just very quickly, we commission in a slightly different way in education. We mainly do it through really detailed commissions and commissioning briefs that you'll find on the BBC commissioning site. That's because we've got to ensure every piece of content has really clear learning outcomes or has sort of behaviour change call to actions and methodology behind it. We don't tend to ask for, unsolicited ideas, although we're always happy to receive them. If you're interested in any of our commissions, just let me know. My name was up there. It's Helen Fowkes at bbc.co.uk, and we can add you to our indie commissioning mailing out list, and then you'll get mail outs and you'll kind of get notified if we've got new commissions, and it would always be lovely to work with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Helen. And then finally, please welcome Evie, Digital Commissioner Editor for Youth and Entertainment at Channel 4.
Hi everyone, yeah, that's me. We're quite a new department at Channel 4. We sort of oversee our and commission onto our digital platforms. Normally YouTube is the sort of hero platform that we commission onto, but also looking at TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook and Instagram. I sort of oversee our entertainment strategy, but we also have other commissioners looking after comedy and factual. But because we're not sort of governed by traditional linear slots, they all sort of bleed into one. The main approach that we're sort of looking at this year is to really empower the voices of creators. So that's digital talent. We've been working with the likes of Chunks and Nella Rose and Amelia de Moldenberg and Alhan Genjai to sort of create really authentic content that speaks to their audiences. And how can we as Channel 4 bolster them and give them a separate platform than that they could get on their own social media platforms, on their own YouTube channels? What can we bring to them? We've been partnering them up with production companies with expertise in the field, but also really importantly trying not to squash their voice that they've so expertly developed on their channels. We commission sort of primarily for 16 to 24s with a real active push to bring in 13 to 17-year-olds. Our sort of philosophy on that is that 13 to 17-year-olds quite often watch up. So they want to be watching what their older siblings are watching, not necessarily content that's sort of specifically designed for them. And we kind of look at all of our commissions in two buckets. We've got hero content, which is sort of your higher price point, spiky, splashy, pure Channel 4 remit, but led by these creators. And we've got what we call reach content, which is your more high volume, low cost content that we're sort of starting to experiment in that space at the moment. And it's very YouTube native. So you're looking at platforms like The Cut and Jubilee and Wall of Productions for sort of inspiration there. As I said, we are quite new. A lot of our content's currently being stockpiled for quite a big launch moment, as well as our TikTok strategy. But we're really looking to work with indies that have never worked for Channel 4 before, indies that sort of represent underrepresented communities, and people that, really have an inherent understanding of digital content, which, as we all know, young people are super engaged with and finding exciting. So I don't think my show reel is as explicit as Carl's, but here's what we've been up to in digital commissioning.
Mamma mia.
Oh my God.
How do I go up again?
Go!
Baby bet, ayy, couple racks, ayy, couple Grammys on him, couple blacks, ayy, that's a fact, ayy, throw it back a bit.
Fuck. Where is the adjudicator?
I don't want you speaking on my show.
None of this would have happened had Alfie been able to keep his dick in his pants.
You said you're a chef and you can cook in it.
Am I meant to cut chicken with a spoon?
Maybe.
Catch.
No, I don't like catching.
You're looking at a minimum 40 quid. 40 quid? Really? 1,000, 40,000.
I think everyone that's watched is going to think, nah, he's so rascal.
No fappening happening.
No faffing happening.
I don't even call it the internet, I call it the pornography.
Hire myself to make it look like these employers were from inclusive businesses.
It's time for Romesh's total domination of kids.
Right, you got the catchphrase already?
This is the best.
Thank you, Evie, and thank you, everyone, for sharing those insights, some very insightful. The big theme of this year's conference is what's next. So it'd be really interesting to understand how you see your platform catering for this audience in the near future. Shona, should we start with you, what you're expecting soon? I mean, obviously you've got this whole new strategy.
Yeah, so it's quite exciting, really, because at the moment, S4C is looking at the whole strategy, not just kids and teens and stuff, and then working out how everything fits into that. But what we have recognised is that we've been letting down the audience above 12. And it's a specific audience. And I'm really glad that the opportunity came through the YAC Fund to commission the 2 dramas, because that's really opened the conversation for us as to, OK, if people want to make this content, kids want it, We know that's true because we've done research with youngsters in Wales, and they want drama that relates to them and to that age. So we know it's work, but then it gives us challenges as to where do we put it, because if we're using anything that's risky or whatever, you can't put it out where a younger child might watch. So it's given us some really good challenges. So moving forward, it's early days. I mean, I don't think the strategy will be clear to the sector until later on this year. So it is early days, but we do know that drama is got to be a focus. But like lots of other people have said this week, you know, we've got to be really clever with financing, because our channel budget isn't massive. And so it's a matter of being clever and thinking how to make content, drama content for this age, which will sit not necessarily, you know, it can sit on whichever platform that works. So we are developing our digital platforms and the infrastructure that we can put stuff on. So yeah, so it's early days. So I'm being really vague about it, but you know, there's nothing much more I can say really.
Broad opportunities.
Yeah. Watch this space.
Yeah, great. In terms of what's next, Carl, you mentioned how you were sort of wanting to look more at that younger end of the audience. Do you see yourself, I guess, making content specifically for them, or broadening the potential audience of the content you're doing?
I mean, we sort of work on the basis that younger teens audiences will always want to watch up, so which is why we've got more of that sort of risque content or edgier content in there as well. I think like it's risky for a broadcaster like us at least to go too niche, so we tend to commission programs or content that will appeal to those young audiences, but not exclusively so. So we still get a sort of decent sized audience to them. We've commissioned quite a few teen-focused, a few of our shows have had the word teen in front of them, like Teen First Dates, Teen Mum Academy, and other shows that have been very, very targeted at that audience. They have been smaller in terms of volume, but the profile has been much younger, so that's sometimes the trade-off. As I said before, we've pivoted the strategy away from away from a mixed genre proposition of scripted and unscripted to just unscripted in terms of original commissions. And that was mostly born out of an economic decision. We can get more volume on the channel, and those shows can be sort of transformative for us in terms of delivering share and youngs to the channel. So that's why we focused on factual and reality in the acquisition market as well, actually. And again, big young audiences coming in for that. And I suppose the key for it in terms of what's next, and Evie, I think, will speak to this a lot in terms of digital commissioning, but we're seeing young audiences, devouring content online that is so sort of raw and unfiltered that I think their experience, of linear TV in the future will sort of have to have more and more of that. You have to kind of deliver as much authenticity as possible. And there's this tension that we sort of wrestle with or try to get right between, optimising the entertainment value of something like, let's say, Married at First Sight, without compromising on authenticity, so the emotional kind of charge of that piece of content feels completely real. And that's difficult because the more you try and make something entertaining, the more you interfere with format or construct, the less authentic it can sometimes feel. So that's the tension we're always trying to balance. But I think authenticity, the sort of UGC content, as I said, Eva will probably speak to this, but that you're seeing, huge volumes on socials, will start to appear, I think, more in our linear long-form content on VOD as well.
Great. Helen, I guess with what next? I imagine the pandemic was quite it really showed the value of educational resources at home. Is that an ongoing factor in how you're moving forward?
Well, I think Bite Size has always been digital first. It's about 23 years old now, and I remember seeing a clip on its 20th birthday of that Pebble Mill programme at lunchtime, if you're old enough to remember, and them saying, there's this thing called the internet, and these people in BBC Education have got this new thing for all those kids who are taking their exams. And, we've expanded, as I've talked about, but we're there for kids digitally, from when they start school all the way up to 16 and beyond 16. We know that kind of A-level students, and sometimes even, those starting their degrees, just check on Bite Size just to make sure they've got the formulas right and things like that. So I think the pandemic, obviously, because everybody came away from school, they did really look, to many, many broadcasters and many organisations to support parents. I think what BBC Education and the BBC in general could do was really rally round and offer a really comprehensive service. But what we do is we serve what our audience needs now. So, for example, if you were taking GCSEs this time, the exam boards sort of changed the syllabus. You didn't have to quite do as much in your exams. It was actually quite confusing, I think. But Ofqual asked the BBC and asked Bite Size to kind of be really clear about what's in the exam and what's not in the exam. Because we're always there just to help teenagers. We're useful to teenagers, I'd say we're a little entertaining, but our main thing is use, So we always follow what's in the curriculum. We always make sure we're offering it in a variety of different digital ways, video, interactives, some even like text, less so. So it's always looking at what our audience need next. We'll always follow the curriculum, as I say, because that's what they're going to be tested on, and that's what teachers would recommend. But we do see a real value in supporting kids all the way through school. And we know what the pandemic has, we've got some very resilient teenagers out there, but we also know that there has been an increase in mental health issues. And we want to support that as well with all the other campaigns that we do. Similarly, fake news, and we're all on those feeds. You want to know the right information and you want the skills to be able to do that. So we're there just to, what our audience needs is what we'll give them.
Great. Evie, I guess it feels like you're very on it to already be sort of, on TikTok and Snapchat and making content for these platforms, but you're always sort of looking for what's the next platform and where the audience are going to go next.
Yeah, I feel like we're sort of like, obviously TikTok's quite a big revolutionary platform that we're really excited to be exploring this year. And I think within those, because they're so fast evolving and the trends and the audiences that are consuming and the niches that they're exploring are just always changing, it's like making sure that our team are really on the pulse with what's happening, but also being led and fed by the creators that we're working with. So yeah, we're always looking for the next platform, but actually the ones that we've got at the moment are really exciting for us, and and we're kind of making sure that everything, like Carl said, feels authentic within those platforms. So if you're pitching as a TikTok idea, it's probably not going to work on YouTube or Snapchat. And it's like having a real understanding of what you're pitching, how you're pitching it, and then why it feels Channel 4, and like why the next generation are going to have that excitement and that risk-taking, like sort of everything that feeds all of Channel 4's content and E4's content is like, how do we translate that brand values essentially across to the younger generation through these platforms?
Okay, so is that sort of, I guess, the strategy behind the content is to familiarise them with the Channel 4 brand and the shows you have, or is it sort of, I mean, there's so much vying for their attention these days, is it sort of to point it in a certain way? Or?
Yeah, I guess actually quite a bold part of the strategy is to not, for digital original commissioning, is to not try and get people across to the linear channel. It's more about creating bespoke content for people on those, young people on those platforms. So actually we're quite blessed with being able to say, look, like Chunks is the biggest digital star for young people at the moment, but he might not connect with an older audience on linear. So actually we're giving the space for those creators and those talent and the next generation to kind of to learn the craft that we're so like proud of at Channel 4. But it doesn't mean it's going to translate across always to linear. But obviously sometimes me and Carl go back and forth, and I'm like, you need to see this person, and he's like, you need to see this person.
But I think that's something like that I've learned in the last few years working with the digital commissioning team, that sort of traditional broadcasters, I think, have undervalued or misunderstood the real value or potential of those social platforms, and have used them really just to market their linear content. And actually, when you deliver digital-first content for that audience, you have a much more meaningful relationship with them. And that is the big shift that's happened at Channel 4 in the last few years, where we've got a dedicated team that commission just for those audiences there. In the same way that there is a difference, I sort of often talking about, difference between, say, radio and TV. You might have talent that cross over now and again, but they are very different mediums with different sort of rules, if you like. And sort of respecting that. I think traditional broadcasters or linear producers sort of see it as the same, and that is a mistake.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
It's difficult for us because we're one channel. We don't have channels within a channel. And we do have X amount of hours that we have to fill. But I would agree with that. I just think the only thing that's raised its head this week, which has really sort of resonated with me, is this digital poverty. And we do know that, with the things as they are, people don't have access to proper broadband, people don't have access to kit, people don't have access to Wi-Fi, they're choosing between Wi-Fi or a tin of beans. So it's all these things that are going on at the moment. So for us at the moment, the linear, gives our kids access to the stuff, but I totally agree that, there's stuff that should live on certain platforms which it don't necessarily need to cross into something else because that's where it lives.
No, great. I don't know if I've just happened to have found myself in a really nice bubble on the internet, but the young people I sort of come across feel really engaged in, bigger issues. It's always not that fun to be a teenager, but sort of, I guess from our perspective, it looks like a particularly scary time. In terms of sort of the content you're looking at, do you think you're focused on shows that reflect those issues and that are really important to teenagers currently?
Me specifically?
Yeah.
With the teenagers, and it's difficult for me because I'm not responsible for the content which is 16 plus. So that's another brand. The 13 to 16, we are gonna focus on drama, but we need to look at what the youngsters need. So that's going to be a focus for me, is put yourself in their shoes and speak to them. Because we can't compete with Netflix, we can't compete with all these biggies. So we need stuff that suits our audience, but that's original for us, and that works for the audience, and that they're not trying to think that we're competing. That it's just, that's the content in Welsh, that works for us, it's Brill, and then we watch that on Netflix or whatever. But I think we need to talk to the audience, and that's going to be my first, if anybody speaks to me about doing drama for the teens, it says, speak to them first. Because it's really easy for us to think what they want, but actually we don't know. And we certainly don't know after COVID. Because I'm thinking, everybody's thinking everything's doom and gloom and stuff, but actually they're not. I don't go out and party anymore, but they were just raving. So, you just think, yeah, we need to talk to the teens, especially for us now, starting this off. There's an opportunity for us to go and talk to our young people all over Wales, because living in Cardiff is very different to living in North Wales. And the world of living in Cardiff is really different to living in North Wales. So we need to go and talk to them and ask them what they want.
Yeah, no. Carl, I know Channel 4 had sort of, I guess, used, like teenage consultants type thing on scripted shows in the past. Do you do that specifically for factual programming as well, or involve them in those ways?
Yeah, we've got panels that we speak to, and as you were saying, we know our audience are really engaged with lots of big issues. I think for E4, and that, as I said, that's the sort of main priority for me, and that's where we spend the most money in my role. It's an entertainment proposition, so we want it to be a place where young audiences can feel like they can escape and relax. But we also know, as I said, that they're really engaged with a number of issues, and we've used this sort of phrase of like surprisingly deep content. So, you're sort of met with what seems to be quite an entertaining proposition. I mentioned Team First Dates, I think that's a very good example of it. But once you're into that show, you suddenly get into, discussions about grief, mental health, body image, and I think, young audiences are really sophisticated and want that sort of depth and richness in the storytelling. They don't want just sort of celebrity and, froth, basically. So I think that sort of way in which we're doing it, we front and centre the entertainment, and then we deliver the sort of richness by stealth, if you like.
Yeah.
From our perspective, it's all about tone. It's all about how you make sure your tone of your content feels right, it feels authentic. And, if you want what we're trying to do, getting teenagers to look at things differently or do things differently, or say in the sustainability place, use their voice, use their ability to kind of change things, because we know from research reduces climate anxiety if you feel you've got a purpose. To get that tone right, you've got to just do everything with that audience, and we test everything in education with that audience, and we'll probably do quite long kind of pilot processes with different content to kind of see, well, I don't want it to feel like it's condescending or it's not authentic, because then they'll smell that a mile off and they won't use it. So I think that's always the key with the stuff that we make.
And talking about sort of, I guess, what audiences want, you said, you're very led by the curriculum, but obviously you have the careers stuff, which seems to, it goes above and beyond what my experience was. So are you ever sort of looking for content that does go above and beyond perhaps the curriculum?
So obviously curriculum is our kind of bread and butter and is our core, and we're always led by the curriculum for that part of the content. But we know from research, that all kids, whether they're academic or not, want to know what they want to do after school and what they want to do, as they get older. That's why we brought in that kind of careers side to bite size, and we're expanding in that area. We're looking for more job profiles, and as well as sort of having that digital element of what we do, we're starting to do a lot more face-to-face. The BBC, for its centenary, is doing a big tour in schools across the UK called Share Your Story, which is around giving teenagers their own voice and also demonstrating to them there's a lot of jobs in the media industry, and those are jobs that everybody can do, but sometimes until you see what the jobs are or see people who do those jobs, you don't know they exist. So I think that's a really important, I think from BBC Education's point of view, making sure we're supporting kids when they leave school and what they do next, is absolutely essential, and we're really glad that we've moved into that career space.
Great. Evie, you said you've been led by talent and you're teaming them up with production companies, some of whom have, real specialism in digital content. Thinking about people in the room, do you also work with other companies or people who do cross-platform type content?
Yeah, absolutely. The door's always open, and I think as long as you've got, if you're pitching as an idea that you feel like completely suits our platforms, and you're sort of respecting the platform and hiring sort of maybe a digital producer or digital editor that really understands that quite different way of storytelling. A story's a story, a good story's a good story, but there are sort of specific ways of cutting and editing for all the different platforms that we commission onto that really matter to keep people engaged. And we can see from our data, when people drop off to the frame, because, you can see we have all that in front of us and who we're engaging with and how old they are. So I think it's happy to work with any indie, and whether they're sort of a more traditional indie who've done lots of linear content before and they want to get into digital, happy to hold a hand that way, or happy to hold a hand in a really green indie that hasn't done much other than make their own content on their own platforms with no compliance and legal and business affairs. And we've worked with a lot of those companies this year to get them that experience within a broadcaster as well, and you're learning the ropes sort of across the board.
Great. Carl, curious to know, sort of with the introduction of E4 Extra, how that will have an impact on any potential opportunities for production companies here.
I'm afraid it won't have a huge impact because there isn't an original commissioning budget for it at the moment. E4 Extra is an extension, or in terms of the sort of scheduling of what 4Music was. The reason we changed the channel to E4 Extra was because, well, firstly, it being called 4Music when there was very little music on it didn't seem to make sense, and so now 4Music is an actual just music channel. And it's strengthened the E4 brand. Well, we hope it will strengthen the E4 brand and provide a little bit more shelf space on E4, because we're moving some of the acquisitions that we had on there before onto E4 Extra. So for the time being, there isn't any original commissioning budget.
Okay, but with that shifting, perhaps, would that then maybe open?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and it frees up more spend for shows in the factual reality space. And I know those are two quite sort of broad, well, they can be interpreted in lots of different ways, factual and reality. But of course, we want it to feel young skewing. I would say that we tend not to, or in my time at least, tend to focus on subject areas that we know the audience consistently kind of engage with. We're not trying to unearth some new niche, but that it's the fresh way into it that will stand out. And I'm sure everyone is constantly thinking that way anyway, but it's worth sort of reminding. But yeah, so that is where the opportunity has come from now, because of that new money that's been, well, new space has been freed up.
Great. Sioned, I guess obviously you're prioritising Welsh language series and Welsh language production companies, but are there any opportunities, I guess, for English series?
Yeah, the door's open to anybody. All we say is that there needs to be a Welsh production talent involved, because obviously we're dealing with the Welsh language. So, ideas can come from anybody, but just for people to be mindful that they might have to think of, who they'd like to work with or produce with or whatever that's Welsh speaking. Because we need to be, people need to understand our audience, because it's not just the language, it's the culture and stuff as well. So it's more than just the language. So we're open to anybody, but just to, I might say, okay, that's brilliant, but would you mind working with such and such? Or can I attach such and such person to your project? But it's just, anybody really, because we've got lots and lots of viewers who aren't in Wales. You don't have to live in Wales just to speak Welsh. They're all over the world, but they tune into S4C. So we're in the same. So we're open to anybody, but it's just to be mindful that people who don't have anybody on their team would need to bring somebody in.
Okay, great. Before we move to Q&A, if we can quickly just go through everyone again to sort of, I guess, what you're looking for and how do people get in contact with their ideas.
Right. What I'm looking for is open-ended at the moment, and that was unclearer. But the way to get in touch is email. I'm not looking for big pitches. I'd far rather an email with a brief outline of an idea, and then we can arrange a Zoom meeting or a meeting in person or whatever. Because I find that that's a more organic way at the beginning of something to get it working. And then there are processes then. If the idea ticks the boxes, then there are processes. But in the first instance, email and then meeting.
Great. Carl?
Those three buckets I mentioned before in the unscripted space, so character-driven, factual, so larger-than-life characters that just sort of leap off the screen in whichever precinct that you might find them in. We desperately need more ideas in that space, sort of lower cost between, I don't know, any between 130, 140 up to sort of 180k an hour. Lower cost returnable formats that can be scaled, so i.e. you can commission 10, then 15, then 20, then 30 a year. Depending on the size of order, but they tend to be about 160k an hour. Shows like Tattoo Fixers, Don't Tell the Bride I mentioned earlier, are good examples of it. And then finally, in the premium reality space, we're always open to big new reality shows that will skew young. I know I've mentioned how broad some of these things can feel, but if they can appeal to that 16 to 24-year-old audience, then we're really, really interested.
Great. Helen?
So yes, as I said, we tend to commission off detailed briefs. All our briefs go on the BBC commissioning site. As I said at the top, we have a lot of audiences that we cater for. So 0 to 16 and plus, teachers and parents. So there's quite a range of content that we look for. And if you want to get the mail out, so it lets you know when commissions are on the site, just send me an email and we'll get you on the list.
Great. Evie?
Evie, sorry, before you can email me, I forgot to say that. Please email me. I'd love you to email me. That's what, sorry, I should have said that.
Yeah, we're looking for content across YouTube, Snap and TikTok primarily, and Facebook and Instagram as well, if there's something that perfectly suits those platforms. Definitely 16 to 24-year-olds and 13 to 17s, not interested in anyone or anything older. Talent-led, digital talent first. We're looking in entertainment particularly for sort of like stunts with scale, pranks with purpose. We're looking for reach content that is studio shot, touches on sort of like social experiment worlds. But as we are so new, it's quite fun and quite able to experiment with form across things. We do have a digital commissioning brief, which is quite detailed and has the sort of contact details for the factual and comedy commissioners as well. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that. Always happy to be emailed, always happy for like an intro chat. And top lines are sort of, if it's going on YouTube, if you can't get it in the title, it's probably not going to work for us. So the shorter and snappier, the better, and we can go into the detail later.
Great. We've had lots of very good questions. This first one for Carl. Do you anticipate the move from scripted will be permanent for you?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Sorry, do you anticipate the move away from scripted content will be permanent for the channel?
I hope not, because before COVID and the sort of stripping the budgets away from E4, I had like 3 or 4 scripted projects commissioned. In fact, Big Boys, which played on Channel 4, was an E4 show that got moved across. So I hope not. But realistically, I can't see or promise anything in the next few years because it's just so competitive now. And it feels like we're making way in the factual reality sort of genres. So on a personal level, I hope not, but at the moment, we don't have plans.
Sure, thank you. This is for anyone. Do you think there is space for animation for teenagers? Probably not.
I think that there definitely is space for animation. It's not something we're currently looking at, but like if you look on sort of YouTube and stuff, there are loads of animation series. We do have Mashed on Channel 4 as well, which is sort of a gaming animation series. It's not something we're actively commissioning for at the moment, but
we've obviously got like one of the biggest, young skewing animation, Rick and Morty. Obviously not British, but and we've looked at trying to originate. It's the cost again. If people can find ways to make it affordable, then we'd always look at it. But like Evie, it's not a priority. We're not actively asking for animated series.
Okay, and Sinead, your animation is usually dubbed. Is that right?
And animations, yeah, we don't have the finances to get involved with animation production, unfortunately, at the moment.
Okay.
So we tend to either an enhanced acquisition, or we acquire them and then we dub them. And then with the older ones, then we may do the same as our teen platforms, expand. Then we may look at that market. But I'd agree, if there's a way of offering animations, original ones in Wales that we can afford, then yeah, my door's very much open.
So that there's space and a want, just not a possibility at the moment. Yeah. I think a few people have spoken about teens sort of viewing up and wanting edgier content. Are there examples of edgy content that teenagers are really watching online?
Yeah, I'd say if anyone's familiar with Nico Milana, he's a digital first creator, he's a YouTuber. He ran for London Mayor a few years ago and actually beat Lawrence Fox off the back of his social digital campaign. He's incredible, he's like a real talent. He's just been to America to track down the most racist part of America and found the leader of the KKK and essentially trolled him for half an hour. But he's, I think it got about 8 million views in a day. He's a prime example of how young people are engaging in politics and social issues in an edgy, risky way, not having to... I mean, he lied and said he worked for the BBC, but no one's regulating him. But I really encourage you to watch that kind of content because that's what we're sort of looking for on our platforms in a way that would pass our legal and compliance.
We announced the Alhan series.
We haven't announced that yet. But we do have something coming up that's in a similar space. It's really exciting.
Sinead, you spoke about, liking quite a casual introduction to shows that early ideas.
Yeah.
Somebody's asked what's involved or what are the stages in commissioning? In other words, what does a successful buy look like? And what should the content creator / lead producer expect?
Say that again.
So what's involved or what are the stages in the commissioning process?
What's involved is, with all of us, not just me, but the whole team, is that it's an introduction first and somebody needs to have a clear idea. So we need to know straight away what's in the tin. And then if the idea is liked, it's then discussed with the head of content. And then it goes then what we call, can you still hear me? Yeah. It goes then into what we call like a traffic light system, where it's yellow, it goes up the stages. And those stages involve different things. So initially then, if we like the idea and everybody likes it, then we'd ask for a budget. And then that would probably go back and forth, and then there's then what we call a production cloud that it would need to go in there then, and business affairs would look at it. But we are looking with this new strategy for that process to be fairly short. So from, beginning conversations to getting a green light could be as short as 4 weeks, which is it's great for, for all the indies who need to know what they're doing and when the next job's coming up.
Great. Helen, video length preference seems to be changing. In your eyes, what's the ideal video length for digital channels directed at teens today?
So we're always looking for 5 and under. But yeah, that's sort of we wouldn't go any further than 5. That sort of thing. We'll tend to have a series, maybe a half hour, but of 5 or shorter chunks. Some of our campaigns, no, this is not teens. This is for tiny happy people. It's 1 minute, 1 message, because we put a lot of that on, on social platforms as well as that, and that's the sort of length people want to watch.
Evie, is it the same for you, or is it different per platform?
Definitely different per platform. I'd say for our YouTube platforms, you're looking at like 10 to 15 minutes. We would be happy to go a bit longer if it felt like it deserved it. Like I think actually social content is getting longer, especially on YouTube. Snap is probably 5 to 8 minutes. Facebook and Instagram sort of varies on what you're doing. TikTok, we're experimenting still in the shorter form space, although TikTok are, like 1 minute to 3 minutes, but TikTok are also going longer. So definitely depends on the idea, which is quite freeing, hopefully, so it's not sort of super rigid.
This one's for anyone. Can you see any content trends on the horizon that you think will be relevant with the tween/teen audience in the coming years?
Content trends.
Me and Carl have been talking about the use of UGC quite a lot. Like, you're seeing into people's bedrooms and lives in the most authentic way because they're showing you themselves with no filter, ironically. And like we're wondering sort of if there's a way of us experimenting by using that. Every young person now knows how to document their lives. Like if you've got a phone, you have access to a phone, you know how to show your life in the way that you really want to show it. So how can we capture that in a format that feels like we're not sort of, again, overproducing it, I suppose.
And that's interesting because we, at the end of, I could say the end of COVID, but because we've done a lot of user generated content on S4C. That's been part of a lot of what we've done. Kids didn't want to know because they were screened out. They didn't want to film themselves, they didn't want to show themselves, and we're still living with that at the moment, which is why we've gone for drama for the teen initially, until that trend starts changing back up in Wales. But it's been fascinating because, that performance instinct seems to have gone a bit. Right. It's coming back, but it's taking a while.
And I suppose, like my understanding of UGC has sort of changed over the last 10 years. It used to be kind of, grandma falling over at a wedding and you filmed it on your camera and sort of that, and it became part of a clip show or something. But now I think not only are there sort of content creators or performers, as you say, that thing, but also filmmakers. And we put a brief out recently about this, but finding people who are already just instinctively making content very, very well, and where can they get to, or how close can they get to a story that producers, or TV production companies can't. And again, I think that's super interesting. How can you sort of galvanise, put heat under all those people? Yeah.
Another one for Evie. Would you be open to collaborations with other brands who have their own presence on TikTok?
TikTok, probably not quite yet. I think we're it's not sort of properly launched yet, but we are, again, looking to work with creators over production companies due to the sort of like really fast reactive need to get stuff on trend on TikTok. We do a lot of branded entertainment content across all of our social platforms. We work with everyone from like Balmain to Visit Britain to Heinz, and that the sort of that content is probably the reason they're coming to us as a brand is to come to our platforms, and everything has to feel very Channel 4. Would definitely be open if someone's got like a TikTok channel that they're really proud of and would like to sort of make content for our platforms. Great. Not quite sure how we do it in sort of a sort of proper handshake way at the moment.
Okay. This one's from Paul Fernley. It says, you're all involved with really credible brands that connect to young audiences. Are any of you interested in the youth audio space, including podcasts? They make the Hollyoaks podcast and would love to see more opportunities in this space from trusted brands.
Is that a question for me?
We were all like, went like that.
You looked at me there. Helen, or who wants to answer that? Ellen, you go for it.
I think from the education perspective, and also from the news perspective, from Newsround, I think we're not. You're all right. Oh, gosh. We're not there yet, but we're thinking about it. We're thinking about that space and how we can utilise the audio space. We know that teachers use audio in the classroom a lot, in terms of what they do for assemblies and things like that. But whether it works for the teen market, we're at very early stages.
Are you looking at podcasts at all? Or?
Yeah, we could do. And actually, I had a conversation about it earlier with somebody, because it's something, because we're expanding our digital platforms and stuff, it could just sit as something which is purely digital for a certain type of audience. So, yeah.
Great.
Sorry about that.
Are you okay? Do you want a lateral flow?
A test.
Okay. I feel a lot better. Are program makers being steered by social media, or is social media steering program makers?
That's a hard question.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of what we were saying before about if you see a trend on social media, it doesn't mean that that's going to last longer than the place it exists. Like, we get a lot of pictures like, oh, we saw this dance on TikTok and now we think we should do a show about that dance trend or that transition trend on TikTok. And by the time you sort of got the pager over, the trend's gone, it's moved on. Like, it's kind of more about finding those core stories that we all relate to and things that young audiences are always going to connect with, than I think being led by social media so much. That's what sort of I personally sort of believe. But.
Okay, lovely. I think that's all we have time for today. But thank you so much to our panellists, the session's producers, and of course the terrific tech team. Remember, there are 8 other Commissioner conversations in the video library for CMC 2022, mainly focusing on international commissioners and very much worth a watch. All that video, there are 55 pieces altogether, will be available to you exclusively until September 30th this year. Tea and coffee is now available in the foyer, kindly sponsored by the wonderful Screen Skills. If you've bagged yourself a speed meeting, please remember that these will take place on Zoom. Next up here in the main stage is the final session of the conference, The Last Word, at 3:30, where everyone comes back to say goodbye. So please leave now, but then come back.